Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good, and also giving you a lot of helpful information, especially when it comes to social media, apps, technology, and so much more. We're here with one of Forbes' 50 leading female futurists. She's a technology strategist, an author, and a certified futurist. Crystal Washington, how are you doing, Crystal?
Fantabulous, Jeremy.
Well, we had an honor of having you speak at one of our cityCURRENT Signature Speaker Series events. You were amazing. You covered a lot of ground, but before we talk about a recap on that side, give us a little bit of just how you got into this world of technology and being a certified futurist. So explain even what that means, but give us a little bit of your backstory.
Oh, just a little taste. So my background is not in technology. My degree is in hospitality with an emphasis in sales and marketing. And that's what I did when I graduated. I went into sales in hotels. And what happened was I'm a millennial. And so we get bored. So I was a great salesperson. I was, killing the numbers, but I got bored. I told my boss, y'all are paying me great, but I crave numbers too. So they put me over revenue management, which is also kind of a marketing position. And there's this little thing called social media that was new on the horizon. And I remember talking to my boss and saying, hey, I have a feeling this social media thing is going to be big, which now, we're like, duh. But at the time it wasn't. And I said, I have a feeling that, one day companies might get on here too. And think about it. Think about a Coke being able to have a conversation with one of their consumers. And I'm all, proud of myself for this. I'm like, this is going to happen. And my boss looked at me and he said, look, kid, you're cute and you make us a bleep load of money. He didn't say bleep. He said, stick to what you know. I said, oh. So again, millennial, remember? So 6 months later, I quit my job. I started a digital marketing firm. And that's really where the technology came from because I saw the writing on the wall. And I'm really good at spotting trends beforehand and figuring out how people can exploit them for the better, right? And so then when you talk about the certified speaker, the certified futurist piece, so from the consulting, I ended up going more into the speaking area because so many of my clients asked me to speak at events. And at one point I had so many requests. I was just, doing it as a nicety for my clients, but I had to just start saying no because I didn't have time. And, one organization said, but we'll pay you. And I said, oh, so the speaking launched there. And what happened was I was using so much futurism anyways. People were always asking me, foresight-based questions like, what do you think is the next step of this? And so I was already doing it. So I was like, let me just go ahead and actually get certified, go through the courses so that I have the title for what I'm already doing anyways, just showing people what's coming next and how to prepare. And not just that, but it's not about being defensive. It's actually shaping the future. You can actually take trends, see what you do or don't like, and actively work to shape what is coming. And that's what I like to encourage people to do.
And I think that you do a very good job of not just seeing it, but know how to apply it and then explain it. And that's a whole nother thing is you might be able to see the trend, but if you don't really know how to explain it and share it with others and make it digestible and understandable, then all of a sudden there's a big gap there. And so you're able to close that gap. So let's go ahead and dive in and give us a little bit of just a recap of some of the things that you covered during the breakfast that will help kind of shape the conversation forward. But give us a little bit of teaser for some of the takeaways on the breakfast.
Yeah, so for the breakfast, we really focused on leveraging technology for building relationships. We talked about the ways that we can build deeper relationships, whether we're in person or virtual. We looked at social media and LinkedIn specifically and looked at ways that we can stay connected to people. We also, looked at some of the technologies we can use that will help us forge closer relationships afterwards. Some of my favorite items in terms of gifting, customized cards, like using tools like Send Out Cards or Touch Note, or having a celebrity or internet famous person or athlete sending a cameo video, or some of the funny things we can do with Fiverr. So, there's a lot of ways with technology that we can touch people in between the in-person, the handwritten notes, the phone calls. It doesn't take the place of those things. So just showing them just the ways that they can really dig deeper on those relationships and be memorable. Because everyone has tchotchkes, everybody has stuff with their logo on it, trying to stay top of mind with people. And right now, any one of us that's listening or watching right now, can go on our desk or someplace else and we have a bunch of pens and random stuff, but we don't feel an affinity to that brand. And I talked about, giving gifts and not even big ticket items, like things that are $10 or less, that mean something to the individual so that they will remember you, not because of a logo, but because you reflected them back at themselves. So we spent a lot of time on those kinds of things, just the relationship building elements of all of it.
Well, and the basics of using social media to go and do the research, finding out what the connections are and what the passions are, where did they go to college? So you kind of tie in some of those elements so that you can use then that next step of creating something that's meaningful, that has a good story. And then the other thing is too, which I really love, is you were able to kind of combine the in-person audience with the hybrid online audience, especially using LinkedIn. And so, for instance, with the in-person, you were able to use a QR code that they could connect with and connect using LinkedIn. And then for the online audience, encouraging them to go online, type in their kind of handle, if you will, or their link, and connect with each other, and then, kind of carry that forward. But I think that's a cool piece now, because we're living in a hybrid world moving forward where you're going to have to connect an in-person and an online audience. But through LinkedIn, you were able to do it very easily, connecting those dots. So talk about, on your end, when it comes to social media, building relationships, give me one or two of your favorite tips when it comes to helping businesses connect more with their audiences.
I think a big piece, and it's hard to answer this question only because it's so general and there's so many different types of businesses, right? B2B, B2C. There's so many different levels to this. But one of the things that I think is my favorite tip, and you kind of hit on this, is lovingly stalking the other party in a respectful way. And so whether that's an organization, using tools like Indeed and Glassdoor, if you're trying to get a contract or sponsorship or whatever else from another organization, going to those tools and seeing what people are saying about that organization. Even if you're trying to, let's say that you're a hiring manager and you're trying to, seduce some people to your company, or a financial planner, you go to the company that person works for and you can see what people say about their benefits, what they say the top challenges are. Now you know what to speak to lure them away, right? If there's individual gatekeepers, leveraging tools like, yes, Facebook and LinkedIn to see, where they went to college. But if they're on Pinterest, you might see where their favorite sports teams are, their favorite colors, little things that can help you really sear into their mind that you cared enough to look into who they are first. So I think that's probably the biggest tip. And the other one is consistent follow-up. And consistent doesn't look the same in all situations. It might be if you have people you have to stay top of mind with, just consistently, sending a little touch point, even once a quarter. For some, it might even be something that should only happen biannually, right? And others, it might be monthly. Everyone who's listening to us right now is smart enough to figure out what makes the most sense for their own audience, connections, prospects. But that continuous action is what tends to result in relationships, because, when it comes to business, before people do business with us, unless we're selling very low ticket items. So, if you're selling $20, $10, jewelry or something, you don't have to have a high level of trust. But if you're a realtor, or if you're a nonprofit looking for sponsorships where people are giving you, 5-figure numbers, or if you're trying to land 6-figure contracts, that requires a longer relationship. So staying in contact with those people in the long term, possibly connecting on social media, it might take some time, but people are always watching us, and that consistency pays off.
What's one tip for us as individual professionals to be more effective using LinkedIn?
Oh, I think one really good tip would be, if you want to be found, that's not everyone's story, but if part of your reason for being on LinkedIn is so that you're found by certain people, make sure that your keywords, those are words that you want to pop up for in a search. Make sure that those are located somewhere in your profile, because LinkedIn runs off of keywords the same way that websites do. So if someone types in a search words that are not in your profile, you can never pop up in the results.
Very good advice. What has your attention? So on the futurist side, what are some of the trends or maybe specific apps or programs? What are some of the things that have your attention right now?
I think, and I would love to give something cutting edge, and I do have cutting edge things that have my attention, but they're so kind of on the periphery. I don't know if that would work for you. There's some really strange and amazing medical stuff out there and biology based things. But for the purpose of our conversation right now, I think AI, and it's a buzzword, people hear AI all the time, but really understanding how it's permeating our culture and it's shifting how we communicate. You know, there's many email platforms, social networks where when you start to type in, it's finishing sentences for you. But pay close attention, because on some of these platforms, it's not finishing sentences based on what's most common. It's finishing sentences based on what you're most common to say. So understanding how these tools are learning us and learning how to emulate us. People are writing entire books where they're giving just a very small amount of information and AI is continuing it in their voice, writing whole books. So I think it's going to have some really positive impacts. I also think that it has the potential for us to have some things that we should be concerned about, because what does this mean for art if we have these types of programs learning to be creatives? They can never be fully creative, but learning to do it. So that's kind of what I'm watching right now, because that'll definitely impact human interaction. Because what happens when the emails back and forth are almost completely with AI and not the other person, and you don't know it? Is that strange? Do you still have a relationship with that person, or do you have a relationship with their AI or their smart assistant? Who are you bonding with?
Yeah. And I look at, you know, the pluses and minuses, just like you're saying, because I think, you know, with like Tesla or the automated vehicles, it's not just the AI learning for the one, it's the fact that it can learn across the network. And so with every interaction among these thousands and millions of vehicles, they're all learning and becoming better at adapting. And so to your point, while that's an advantage, it's also a disadvantage too. Yeah. What does that mean for businesses though? When you look at how do they process and understand, and because things are changing so rapidly, what's maybe an idea for businesses to try to stay on the up and up, but not lose sight of, you know, kind of go down these rabbit holes? How do you manage this as a business?
So there's two ways to look at this. Okay. So I'm going to give both directions because I believe in giving people options and you figure out what works for you. It could be embracing this trend even more than you already have, right? So because what it does is the increased use of AI, big data, all these things to help small business owners, it actually helps with the labor shortage that we're seeing across industries right now. Because now you have AI, you have data, you have all these programs running that can really automate a lot of the processes for you, right? And so if you have a data shortage, and I've spoken across industries, there's a lot of options for you right there. And then, you know, the relationship between AI and even robotics, right? So there's a lot of stuff you can get robots and programs to do in your stead. That's one direction. The other direction is you could differentiate yourself by, I'm not saying being a Luddite, we don't want to not use technology, but really emphasizing that human touch. Because what happens then is some of the larger companies that have access to all the technology, they're going to lean even heavier on it because they have funding for it. So if you almost pull your business as more boutique and more customized to the client's needs, you can charge a premium because that goes away. I mean, imagine right now, if there was and I'm not saying this should be, I don't think necessarily it's a good business case, but imagine right now, you think about those of us who have, you know, cable or any of those types of services, you know, the internet services where we have to call into any of those larger companies that care about us so much. And all that we go through an automation to finally get an answer and not really get an answer. Imagine a company where people actually answered the phone and helped you through it. Would you pay a premium for that? How much of a premium? There are people who would. So I think applying that type of thing to your business case might work. So again, you could either embrace it, go hardcore with it, or do what you need to, but also let's focus more on the human interaction aspect so that we're almost going opposed to that trend for the people that don't care for it.
And that's a great point in terms of how do you differentiate yourself and carve out your niche so that you can be different. And so whether it's leveraging technology in a full capacity or just leveraging it more for the efficiencies, but focusing on the customer service, to your point, that allows you to stand out and create more opportunities in either direction. Mm-hmm. When you talk about kind of the medical, like you said, and really diving in deep, tease us a little bit on something that really is on that cutting edge that you think, wow, here's something that really is kind of sci-fi, but it could be here before we know it, or maybe it's already happening?
Well, I mean, I think a little bit more of the human machine interface that we're seeing. And I'm not talking about from like an Elon Musk perspective, complete respect to him. But a lot of the technology that he's presenting right now has actually existed for some time. It's just that he kind of adds a sci-fi spin on it and kind of hypes it in that sense. Whereas the scientists who've been working on that beforehand, because they're scientists, they don't present things the same way. They're not storytellers in that way. But I do think it has a great deal of potential, not only when it comes to enabling humans almost to act as superheroes, in the sense that from a standpoint of having greater safety, being able to communicate more efficiently with these machines, maybe the machines even detecting even more things in our bodies. Like the potential is infinite, right? The technology is not completely there. It's not as far as, like I said, some people in the spotlight would have you believe, but it's far enough where it's pretty wild.
I'm thinking, to your point, there's already the ability in terms of where we're headed to create kind of a digital twin. And so it would mimic and it would be able to proactively predict, okay, here are some of the things that could go wrong. And so to your point, all of a sudden now you're kind of future proofing yourself to figure out, okay, instead of going that route, maybe I need to go this route, or it can predict, hey, there could be an issue over here down the road. Let's start working to prevent that. So I think to your point, it really is, in some cases it's sci-fi, Star Trek-ish, but yet the reality is it's happening right now in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
How do you balance work life, technology, normalcy, privacy? How do you balance all this, especially in your world where this is your world?
Yeah, I think that's a very personal choice. So I'll share how I do it, but everyone can make the best decisions for them. Now, for me, I believe in technology balance. And so my husband and I very intentionally do not have children, but we have nieces and nephews. And when they're with me, we don't do a lot of screen time stuff. We take them to physical museums. We've always been the ones to take them places. I believe in having that type of balance. For me personally, I am known to go off the grid. My favorite place to vacation is the middle of the Amazon rainforest. I'm hanging out with the people who live there, a few caiman alligators and some snakes and piranhas. Like there's no internet, right? So I think having those periods where you cannot access internet, if possible, is great. Now, I say that understanding that I might be speaking from a position of privilege, right? If you have small children or something, that might not be something reasonable, but making time so that maybe you can have a half day without technology and leaving them with someone that you really, really trust. I think that's important. So that answers the question, I think, on kind of the technology piece for me. In terms of privacy, people think that they know me a lot better than they do. Because I tend to share just kind of communal thinking. If someone were to communicate with me on Facebook or visit my Facebook profile, and it's a personal profile that a lot of my business contacts are on, I'll talk about all kinds of things. I'll talk about racism, religion. But what's great is, and I'm known for this, is that my posts really don't have a hardcore slant. And I have so many people of so many different backgrounds that we have really engaging conversations. And people know that I demand a certain level of respect for everyone on the post. So they know, you see a few people kind of get spanked and blocked. And so over the years, they've learned, okay, we can have very totally polar opposite opinions, but we're going to have a conversation if we're in crystal space. I do that, but there's certain things I will not share. And again, I'm not judging other people, but I jokingly tell people, you all don't know when I have surgeries or anything else. You'll never know that, or I don't believe in using social media as a diary in the sense that, when you're having issues with people, they know about that. So I think, you set whatever boundaries make sense for yourself. I think if I could leave one important boundary, though, it's not even my personal boundary, but it's one that I suggest we all think about, is our children's boundaries. Because like with my younger nieces and nephews, then there's one nephew that I've kept a lot over the years. As soon as he was old enough to kind of understand the concept of the internet, somewhere around 3, I could kind of conceptualize it. He's always had the ability. I ask him, can I post this picture of you on Facebook or Instagram for my friends? And he has complete autonomy. And sometimes he says, sure, TT. And other times he said, no. And then a couple months ago, he said, you could post it because it's a cool picture, but put a happy face sticker on my face. I can do that. So I think thinking about our children's autonomy, even though we're talking about business, it's still a piece of this. I think that's a big one. I think that's really big.
I agree 100%. And it teaches them to have their own control and boundaries and to be thoughtful about what the world is seeing. So I agree. That's awesome advice. Wrap up, because you mentioned obviously your social media space, but wrap up with how we can follow you and your efforts. And obviously for you as a speaker, where we go to learn more and to book you. And so where do we go to follow all your efforts?
Oh, good question. I like to keep it simple. Just go to Crystal Washington, and it's Crystal spelled like a rock crystal, Crystal Washington, the only way to spell it, .com. And there you can see information about my speaking, my books. You can find out which social networks I'm on. If you want to connect with me, you can send me an email if you have any questions on anything that I've mentioned. So that's the one big hub.
Well, we definitely love everything you're doing. Thank you again for speaking at our cityCURRENT Signature Breakfast and our Speaker Series event. We appreciate you and all of your efforts. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeremy.